It's Thursday, May 14th, 2020, and you have tuned into the Rebel News live stream. Welcome aboard, everybody. And as you know, it's usually the big boss man himself, Ezra Levent, in this space at this time. But Ezra, as you know, is working on a very super special project. And that means my co-host, Sheila Gunn-Reid, and myself, we are here every Tuesday and Thursday to give Ezra some extra time to finish off that very special project. So, Sheila, how are you doing, my friend? And I think this is the moment you tell people what it is we're attempting to do here.
Yeah, you know, I see you've got your ridiculous hat back on. So
ridiculous! How dare you? You're the one.
Indicates-
Wait. You're the one in the morning meeting today that called me a young Rex Murphy. Now, I like Rex Murphy, but I don't think you... Whoa! Holy mackerel. Now, I like Rex, but that's kind of the bad hair day I'm going through as well. So I'm covering up until I can get barber service. And by the way, isn't there something in the works right now that those in federal prisons, prisoners that is, of course, are going to be getting haircuts? There's a tender out for barber service, and I guess for the trans prisoners for dye service and foils and coils and whatever fancy thing you do with your hair when you're one of them there people. Did I get that wrong, Sheila, or what?
No, you got that right. And you just teased my story that is coming out later on today or tomorrow, which should generate some interest. But yeah, we found a request for tender for that, which is interesting because, David, you have to wear a Kevin Federline, the do-nothing who once married Britney Spears style hat to contain your chia pet that's alive on the top of your head. And the prisoners in federal prisons, they're going to get their hairs did. Yeah, we should tell everybody what we're doing and probably apologize for being a little bit late. We thought we were live. We were given air for like 6 solid minutes before somebody told us that we actually weren't live. And what we're doing here today is we're doing our live stream. Like David said, we host it twice a week for Ezra so that he can get some other work done. Did you know Ezra runs an entire news organization? So the fact that he makes time to be on air live 3 times a week just to share his thoughts with everybody is actually quite an accomplishment. But it gives our viewers a chance to interact with each other in the live chat. There's always a very lively discussion going on in there, and there's a lot of regulars getting to know each other, which is kind of fun to see the relationships form. And it gives everybody a chance to interact with David and I and support the work that we do here at Rebel News. So if you're interested and if you'd like to do it completely of your own free will, unlike what the government forces us all to do with the CBC, you can support us by donating a little bit of money into the Super Chat, and it'll highlight your query or comment, and I will be forced to read it, or David will be forced to read it. So sometimes people put some funny things in there that they'd like to hear me say. And you could suggest a topic that you'd like us to discuss, or just, you want to make a point that you want everybody to see. So you can do that in the Super Chat, and it helps us keep the lights on during this coronavirus pandemic.
Indeed, and we really appreciate it, folks. We know that these are tough times, so if you are indeed in a position to give, we really do appreciate that. And we're not like the state propagandist, CBC, getting $1.5 billion. Oh, and by the way, they've got their snout up to the taxpayer trough yet again for a little top up, even though, as you mentioned in our unbroadcasted live stream, Sheila, which had an audience of precisely 2. Why would the CBC need a top-up payment? They should be giving money back because they shut down their local news bureaus, during the biggest story since, what would you say, Sheila, since 9/11? So in the biggest story in 2 decades, let's shut down our coverage, which, for me, the question arises then, why do we need you at all when things get back to normal?
Well, especially during the coronavirus pandemic, because all news is local right now. Everything is about like local regulations, local COVID-19 numbers, local infections, what local places dealing with an outbreak. And we're all getting that news, if you're getting that news from the CBC. I mean, I'm not. But if you are, you're getting it through the lens of Rosie Barton at the National News Desk instead of your local anchors, which is, I think, ridiculous. And yet they want more money. They shut down this division, and instead of returning the money to the taxpayer because they shut down this division, they put their hand out for more. It's all very strange. We already have super chats, though, David, and one of them refers directly to you. And I just want to point out that David and I generally do better on these super chats than the boss does. And I think that it is because the viewer at home feels like they're getting more bang for their buck when they're donating, because you get a little comment from me and a little comment from David. But it is nice to see that the boss has cultivated the kind of talent that can fly a little higher than him sometimes.
In case this backfires, I want this all to be attributed to Sheila Gunn-Reid.
I know. You're a real loyal friend, David. Anyway, we've got a super chat from Mike Jones. Gives us $5 Canadian, and it's to David. Menzies, will you challenge Jonathan Yaniv to a dueling cane match with the winner getting a free berry wax?
Oh, you know what? I'm all up for that. In fact, I'll even...
No!
Wait, challenge Jonathan Yaniv? What was the other part of that?
To a dueling cane match with the winner getting a free berry wax.
Well, I'm not sure. I'd have to research what's involved in waxing exactly. But I will take on Jonathan Yaniv in a cane match, and I don't need a cane, okay? I'm going to go in unarmed and maybe get a little retribution. I guess we're making light of it was a really serious situation going back to August, Sheila, when, if people aren't familiar with the reference, I was involved in the practice of journalism, and Jonathan Yaniv was smashing a steel cane over my head and shoulders, while Mama Yaniv was using her iPad to jam it into my Adam's apple, all captured on 2 cameras, plus the surveillance cameras of the condo complex. And the worst thing of all, Sheila, was the RCMP, even after seeing the footage, going, well, what do you want us to do about it? And basically saying that if you want us to press charges, that means we have to press charges on you for harassment. So I've never seen law enforcement do sort of a version of horse trading when it comes to, laying charges or not. But there's the big purple blob himself, and Mama, that was a shot to my, I think the top of my head, and she really liked going for the Adam's apple, and it's amazing, Sheila. The bigger story here, and you and Kian have experienced it, is how, in my case, it was the law enforcement in BC, the RCMP, not wanting anything to do with it, even with video evidence. With you and Kian, it was a matter of the sheriffs at the court making up. This is almost worse, I think, making up regulations to prevent you from going into a public courtroom to report on his weapons charges case. This is mind-boggling to me, Sheila.
Yeah, you know what? That's funny because that's a great segue into the next 3 super chats we have. Speaking of sheriffs making up regulations, we've got one from David Anderson, gives us $2 Canadian. Will you be going after Kenny like you're going after Ford? Definitely. David Anderson sends us a subsequent super chat again for $2 Canadian, says scrap Bill 10, free Calgary from the lockdown. And Proud Boys Calgary gives us $5 Canadian, says Calgary opening delayed by 11 days. I just want to get back to work and church and spoil my lady. Daily reminder, CCP must be destroyed. These super chats are really great because they're all together and they're all about the same topic. Yes, definitely. We will be going after Jason Kenney in the same way that we're going after Doug Ford. with regard to sheriffs making things up. I saw it firsthand at the legislature in Alberta when they hauled away a peaceful, socially distant protester sitting alone in an empty fountain. They came up and said, we're arresting you under the Public Health Act under Section 73.1. Well, Section 73.1 deals with penalties. It doesn't deal with infractions. So they were just making things up to grab the loudest troublemaker on the steps of the legislature, which is our traditional place for protesting and the one place in this province where our rights should be first and foremost. That's the one place. Look, we should be able to do it anywhere. But if you're going to go scream at the government about your rights being violated, you should be able to do it on the steps of the legislature. And he was hauled away for that. And the sheriffs are Jason Kenney's police force. Yep. And they were very heavy-handed with him. Now, to his credit, Jason Kenney said he's looking for an explanation about why that happened that way. And he said there has to be a means for law enforcement to balance rights with public health orders. But it looks like the way they grabbed that guy and the way they dealt with the crowd that day, there was more exposure to a potential communicable disease than if they had just left everybody alone.
And you know, Sheila, if I may, I want to address the viewer who asked that question. Are you going to go after Jason Kenney as much as Doug Ford? It's not a secret. We lean right of center here, but we're not in the pocket of anyone. I look at our role, Sheila, like the umpire in baseball. We call them as we see them. And, when we see something offside, in fact, even before Doug Ford became premier, and I took some heat for this, I was outraged that Tanya Granick-Allen, the kingmaker for Doug Ford, because without her support, he isn't Premier Doug Ford, it's Christine Elliott, was thrown over the side after old social media posts that weren't politically correct surfaced. No ifs, ands, or buts. It's, hey, baby, what have you done for me lately? And she was tossed to the curb, even though she legitimately won her nomination riding. And I compared that to odious social media posts by Goldie Gameri in the Ottawa area, who said that Christianity is gay, Jesus is worm food. Sheila, could you imagine turning that around to substituting Christianity for Islam and Jesus to the Prophet Muhammad? Could you imagine what would happen then? But nothing to see here, folks. This is okay. And that made me, like I said, even before Doug Ford became premier, that infuriated me that we were seeing the same hypocrisy and double standard crap even before there was regime change in this province. And I called them out for it, as I'm doing right now.
Yeah, I see our role as being the gut check to the right for our conservative politicians. They have all the forces pulling them left. The CBC, the mainstream media, their policy advisors, who are usually generally like middle of the road, and career level bureaucrats. The entire bureaucracy leans left. So it's our job to pull them back to the right. And it's good for a politician, especially a conservative politician who's constantly under attack by the media, to say, whoa, I'm not as right as those guys. Like, somebody has to be to the right of our conservative politicians. I've run petitions against Jason Kenney and his hiring of green bureaucrats, pro-carbon tax bureaucrats, as policy advisors. I had a billboard up on the side of Highway 2 criticizing Jason Kenney for that hiring. So to say that we wouldn't be critical of Jason Kenney, of course we are. When he does something wrong, we're critical. When he does something right, I'm cheering for him in his corner because it's good for Albertans. I really don't care about politicians. The more I know about them, the less I like them, actually. And with regard to what has happened in Calgary, Alberta is supposed to be opening up today. And half of Alberta is opening up today. So Red Deer North is opening up today. Calgary and the Brooks area, they're not opening up today. And that decision because they still have a little bit of an outbreak. Now, it's nowhere near what's going on in other jurisdictions that are opening up already. Yeah. But this overly cautious approach to Calgary and Brooks, especially when, what's happening in the meatpacking plants, it's almost over. Most of those people are recovered. It was made, this decision, with like 12 hours to spare. So you have business owners, bars, pubs that have gone out prepared for this reopening. If you're a pub or a restaurant, you bought supplies, you called your staff back, you bought perishables, and then you're told with 12 hours to spare that you have to wait another 11 days. This is devastating. This will put, if the coronavirus lockdown didn't put businesses out of business, this will put them out of business, because now they're on the hook for these extra supplies. I mean, it is just absolutely outrageous. There was a way to manage this, and it didn't have to happen this way.
You're 100% right, Sheila. And as we've seen, the models don't reflect the real data. And if that part of your province was overly populated with people in their, say, 80s and 90s who had respiratory disease, who had other ailments, I could agree with another 11 days or what have you, shut down of that area. But we know that that is not the general populace at all. We know that relatively young, healthy people the world over, it's not even a rounding error in terms of the percentage of people that have died from this disease. I think it's 0.7% of cases. So again, they're still in overreaction mode. And when, Sheila, in the aftermath, there was going to be thousands of public inquiries the world over about how we handled this, and we really handled it bad. Let's hope there's a silver lining that we've learned. Maybe the way to approach a global pandemic, which isn't Ebola, but something far less fearsome, is not to bring the economy to a grinding halt and put almost everybody out of work, but maybe to direct our resources to the very vulnerable people that are susceptible to this disease. I think we have a lot to learn from how Sweden handled this global pandemic, Sheila.
Yeah, I just pulled up actually the interactive data for Alberta. We've got 1,200 active cases. In total, we had 6,400 cases. So we have well over 5,000 cases recovered. We only have 70 people in hospital right now. And of those 70, 11 are in intensive care. We've had 120 deaths. And I think the other day I saw that nearly 90 of those deaths were in seniors facilities. So the continued lockdown of Calgary businesses, it's absolutely unacceptable. And the way it was done, with the game-changing last minute on them in such short notice, it is absolutely devastating. It's something that so many Calgary businesses are not going to be able to survive. It's just, look, okay, I just brought it up. In Calgary, they have 990 active cases in a city of well over 1 million. And so because of that statistical rounding error, they don't get to reopen. It's atrocious.
And also, Sheila, it's worth putting a footnote on all these numbers, because I've reached out to nurses and doctors that have told me this information. If someone is, say, going through cardiac arrest and they were also COVID-19 positive, it's going into the books as a COVID-19 death, not a heart attack. So many of those death numbers that we see are artificially inflated to begin with.
Yeah, definitely. Let's get through some of these super chats, because I know we have lots of video clips that we want to show today.
Yeah, that's true.
There's so many. And I think they're all really good, really important. So hopefully we'll get through them all. We've got one from Hobbs Lane for $5 Canadian. Keep up the great work. Comment on this virus being the most profitable event for central banks in history. The banks are doing all the administering of all these loans. they're very busy. I think they're hiring extra staff at the bank to deal with all the programs that they are administering on behalf of the federal government. We've got one from Brown Book, gives us $2 Canadian. You two are the only pair that beats a full house. Thank you very much. That's very kind.
Wow.
Yeah. Sobieski gives us $5 Canadian. I hear that things are running away on me. I hear that Chinese army doctors will be administering vaccinations. I don't know about that. But I do know that Canada is cooperating with the Chinese military to develop a disease or develop a, that's a Freudian slip. They're working with the Chinese doctors to develop a vaccination, or with Chinese military to develop a vaccination. So that's kind of scary. But did the Chinese military develop this disease? I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised to find out if they did.
I think that's the firm we posted a video yesterday, didn't we, Sheila? CanSino, which sounds dangerously close to casino, and I don't want to have anyone rolling the dice when it comes to injecting my body with stuff, especially if the origin of this research is coming from the very epicenter of this pandemic. Oh, and by the way, the other two global pandemics that also infected the world in a row. So yeah, I don't know what we're thinking, but you know what, Sheila, we have a prime minister who has a basic admiration for the dictatorship of China when it comes to getting things done. So when you're getting your marching orders from up top, that's the card he's played, and I have never seen him retract that statement, Sheila. No, actually, I think that's his entire foreign policy is drafted around that statement. We've got one from Observer Dude, gives us £5. Thank you, Observer Dude. You're very generous every time that David and I are on air. In the video where Jonathan Yaniv assaulted David, his mom said to David, "You're not talking to him." But I thought David was I thought Jonathan was a female. Yeah, his mom always calls him him. But if David and I do it, we're going before the Human Rights Commission. But his mom always says stuff like, "Leave him alone, leave my boy alone." But if anybody else does it, straight to jail. Isn't that amazing? The woman that gave birth to this creature calls the wannabe she a he. You do that on social media and you violate the terms of the community and you get suspended or banned. This is madness, Sheila.
And you know what? I frankly, I'm not even opposed to just being polite. Like if somebody wants me to call them she and they're not an awful aggressive person like Jonathan Yaniv, I don't really care. Just to be polite, but that's a monster, and I'm not playing that monster's game.
And by the way, Sheila, in terms of aggression, I want to point out, and you can see it in the video, you don't have to believe me, that I wasn't pursuing these two. No. In fact, they had already ran into their condo, and then they came out. You can see in the video, I'm walking backwards, and he's yelling, "Get away from me, get away," as he's swinging this cane.
Did the same thing to Kian. Kian's in a retreat because Jonathan Yaniv is bigger than all of us. And so Kian's in a retreat, and he's like, Jonathan Yaniv is screaming like, "Get away from," and like lunging at Kian and like telling Kian to get away from him. Like, Kian was getting away from you. You get away from Kian. And the mom is the worst of all. Yeah. She just sees red and charges at someone. She did the same thing to me outside of a highly surveilled courthouse, by the way.
Oh, jeez. Look at that. Oh, Herman Munster in a miniskirt. Yikes.
I've never actually seen Jonathan Yaniv in a miniskirt. It's always been pants, and I'm somewhat grateful for that.
Sheila, I long for the good old days when tranny trouble meant that the gear shift was slipping from drive into neutral. Instead, this is what we have to do. More super chats, Mr. Producer nervously said in my earpiece.
Yeah, please. I can feel Justin's nervousness through the internet. I can sense it. We've got one from Jennifer Spiegel, $2 Canadian, no super chat, very kind. We've got one for $5 Canadian from Brian Haydick. No super chat also, but still very generous. We've got one from Gabriel Mullet, $5 Canadian. Do you think Sweden stayed open because they knew it was the right thing, or that they couldn't control the large amount of refugees in their country? I think they just stayed open because they recognized that it was not as bad as the rest of the world indicated, especially for a younger, healthier population.
I also think, Sheila, part of the theory, because, the young kids in Sweden are still in school, that this whole idea of developing a herd immunity in case there is this, much advertised second wave of the Wuhan virus. And, it's not as though things are business as normal in Sweden. I'm just saying, many countries, including ours in Canada, if we were a car going 100 kilometers an hour, we hit the brakes down to 5 clicks an hour. So a few business here and there open. But Sweden probably went from 100 to 85. So, yeah, the restaurants are open and the cafes, but they do social distancing. They have, the plexiglass shields and what have you. And lo and behold, Sheila, the cases did not exponentially increase. Now, the critics are going to say, yeah, but if you compare Sweden's rates to Finland, to Norway, they are higher. That is true. But Sweden is playing the long game here. They're getting the populace, like I said, the theory is herd immunity, so that if that second wave does come, Sweden in the future will be better prepared to weather that storm.
Well, and I'm also curious, when we look back at the data, 2 years out and say, okay, well, these were the people who died in previous years in nursing homes or wherever from diseases like the flu and other communicable diseases, and lay those over with the coronavirus. Are they going to be all that different? I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure at this point. And one thing we did notice around the house, since the kids aren't in school and not seeing their friends, is just the amount of gross diseases they haven't brought home that we sort of think are normal and shrug off, because they are normal and we do shrug them off. I'm looking at my 11-year-old daughter, who constantly has a runny nose all the time, coughing, constant runny nose, because she's a bit of a hugger. And she hasn't had a runny nose since school closed. And so, yeah, people do get germs from their friends, and maybe we're going to change how we deal with each other and interact with each other. But germs are a thing. They've always been a thing since we figured out that germs are out there. We've been aware of how they spread between people. And I don't know. I think that it might change how we interact with people, but I think we're going to see that this has been a huge overreaction to quarantine the healthy.
Yeah.
We've got super chats to get through. Zona Rosa Smith gives us $6.99 Canadian. Trudeau won't be satisfied until all we have left to eat is propaganda. Yeah. And he won't be satisfied until we are all beholden to the government for sustenance and survival. He is keeping everybody locked down and ramping up those CERB payments because he's buying loyalty from Canadians, $2,000 at a time.
Wow.
We've got one from Sheepdog, gives us $5 Canadian. David and Sheila, if you're betting, how long before we adopt the terror in place color code like in the UK? David?
I'm not sure. What would you say, Sheila?
The thing is, in Alberta and in the provinces are in charge of the reopen. So I don't know. That would have to be a nationwide thing. We've got one from Cindy.
Oh, by the way, would you say the provinces are in charge of reopening, Sheila? I hear John Tory, because there's no tax dollar he doesn't love to spend. I want to reiterate that he has hired, from a couple of weeks ago, 2 former lifelong Liberal bureaucrats. One is Saad Rafi. His last boondoggle was the Pan Scam Games, which cost 10 times as much to put on in Toronto than it took in terms of revenue. It's games nobody wanted to see. It sold very few tickets. And this is the guy, Sheila, that John Tory has hired to give advice for businessmen in terms of how to open their businesses. You know how you get the economy going? You just say, hey guys, open your doors. But this guy who would lose his shirt if he had to pay toilet concession at an all-you-can-eat chili eating contest. No, we need to hear him lecture entrepreneurs, businessmen and businesswomen that really know how to make money. What a disgrace.
It's a funny thing, the amount of consultants that are coming out of the woodwork to tell everybody how best to go back to work, go back to doing the things they did just like 90 days earlier. Like, we're all hard of remembering.
Unbelievable.
We've got one from Cindy McSeven, gives us $20 Canadian. Cindy's always very kind to David, and I'm sure David appreciates that very much. She says, I love your hat, David. Keep up the great work, Sheila and David. I feel like I'm living in China. Speaking of cutesy nicknames for what's going on in the world, I saw somebody call the coronavirus the Chi-Com cough. And I know my father-in-law has been calling it the WHO flu, as in like the World Health Organization flu. So I thought that was that's what he calls it when he's yelling at Fox News every night. We've got one from NVP, gives us $5 Canadian. The public is under house arrest while immigration continues unabated. Yes, indeed. I see that Justin Trudeau has provided some sort of subsidy bucks to foreign nationals who are studying in Canada to help them get through the coronavirus pandemic instead of just telling them to go home and be their own country's problem. They're just, bringing in farm workers when Canadian unemployment is nearing 30%.
Yeah. Well, of course, Sheila, why would the Justin Trudeau Liberals say or do anything negative to their future voting base? So, yeah, of course they're going to embrace a policy like that.
Oh, my goodness. Sorry, David, I don't mean to laugh. I'm reading ahead in the super chat. And you've got the Kaporka. Do you know what that is, David?
No.
Did you ever see that Seinfeld when Kramer had the Kaporka? And he was like, he had this irresistible thing that was driving the women wild, and this Orthodox nun left the convent to pursue life with Kramer, and he had to bathe in onions and garlic and this horrible mixture to quell the scent of the Kaporka. Well, you've got the Kaporka today on the live stream, and I'll get to them.
First of all, I'm a huge Seinfeld fan. That might be one of the handful of episodes I must have missed because it's not ringing a bell. But I think I've got the anti-Kaporka. I started wearing this hat after I frightened and confused that CBC reporter outside Queen's Park. She said my hair was scaring her. And she almost ran backwards into traffic on Queen's Park Crescent. So, I don't have a Kaporka problem. I've got the anti-Kaporka virus.
We'll see. Just hang on. We've got one from Michael Chandler, gives us $10 Canadian. Wish all political parties in general were abolished along with a constitutional monarchy. We are strongest together, not divided by another color. Childish flags. We've got one from Dylan S, gives us $5 Canadian. Will you be going to the Canada Day protest at Parliament Hill against Trudeau's puppet regime? I suppose that if someone is going, that might be David. We've got one from Annalisa S. Here's the Kaporka problem, rearing its ugly head. We've got one from Annalisa S. $6.99 Canadian. You both rock, Sheila. It's not my eyesight that is bad. It's the forced isolation that makes me think Menzies is yummy, yummy. Lol. I'm making you an onion cologne so that we don't have to deal with this in the
Just let that
comments.
sink in, Sheila Gunry. Oh, and by the way, that July 1st protest, if you don't want to grind my gears, folks, don't call it the Canada Day protest. I know I'm beating a real dead horse here. It's a Dominion Day protest. Yes. Let us never forget, going back to the early 80s, Justin's papa, Pierre Trudeau, ramrodded through on the last day of the House sitting, I believe it was 1982, with less than a quorum in the House, Sheila. You need at least 20, or at least you did back then, to get legislation approved, changed overnight the regal and historic name of our July 1st holiday from Dominion Day to Canada Day, which to me sounds like one consonant removed from a brand of ginger ale. And, I phoned the Rules Committee about this, Sheila, because I thought, and this is important for any other kind of future legislation, especially right now with the truncated parliament that we have. How can anything be legally binding with less than a quorum? You needed 20, there was only 13, and the answer, Sheila, if the less than a quorum members, in this case the 13 who showed up that day, are in agreement, then the bill carries. Can you believe that? So, cautionary tale.
Well, I mean, couldn't they have just used an order in council the way they did to ban 1,500 guns?
True.
I mean, it's like they just do whatever they want. Yeah, David, come on. We've got one from Connie McDonald, gives us $20 Canadian, says, "You are amazing." I think that's the Kaporka. We've got one from Ray Wilnot, $5 Canadian. Great work, you guys. David, I'm going to send you that Kaporka clip after we get off the air. I don't want to show it on air because I don't want to demonetize the stream the way Ezra constantly demonetizes his. We've got one from Ray Wilnot, $5 Canadian. Great work, you guys. Jennifer Siegel gives us $2. No super chat. Second chat from Jennifer Siegel. Again, $2 Canadian. No super chat. Thank you very much. Ian Tuck. I think we're at the end. Ian Tuck gives us $20 Canadian. If immunization actually works, then why are governments talking about making them mandatory? How is it unsafe for anybody but me if I am not immunized? It's the idea of herd immunity. Some people can't be immunized, and some people immunization isn't effective for them. So they want to make sure as many people are immunized as possible. But I am firmly against mandatory immunization. If there is a if there's a vaccine out there that hasn't been developed by the Chi-Coms for me to inject into my body, maybe, as long as it's not mandatory. The second they make it mandatory, you can put me in jail. Just like Kian said. Kian tweeted that. He's like, if it's not mandatory, then yeah, I'll probably get the immunization. But if the government is telling me that I have to do it, nope, no thanks.
Yeah.
David, we have 17 minutes left in the show, and we've gotten to actually nothing.
Can we go overtime today, because our trained broadcast professional, Mr. Producer, had us talk for 6 minutes basically to each other like we were in a Starbucks back in the day when you could go to a Starbucks and talk to someone. But anyways, we'll bring that up later. So let's get right off the bat to, I think this is an important story. Keep the pandas. Mr. Producer, can you run a clip, please? No. You cannot run a clip. Oh, okay then. Well, this is about, there we go. It is our campaign. We're not running a clip because everyone knows what a panda looks like. Sheila, what do you make of this? We are sending these pandas back to China from Calgary. Meanwhile, we've got the two Michaels, that would be Kovrig and Sopovor. I hope I'm pronouncing that. I apologize if I mispronounced that name. It's been, I think, 550 days they've been incarcerated in brutal conditions, a cell where the lights never go off. If we're in negotiations with two actual human beings, Canadian citizens, why are we kowtowing to the Mandarins in Beijing when they want their bears back, for goodness sakes?
Yeah, it's Michaels, Spavor, and Kovrig.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I think we should be kidnapping these pandas. Like, I just don't understand why we are returning two pandas we've coddled. Pandas that are being treated better than any prisoner in any Chinese jail, let alone two Canadian political prisoner hostages, like the two Michaels, Kovrig and Spavor. We shouldn't be giving these things back. And these bears are nothing but a Chinese racket. apparently China makes you buy bamboo, which is an invasive weed in some parts of the country. Not in Alberta. It's too cold for us to get bamboo. But I mean, this is a houseplant and an invasive weed that grows anywhere. And they've got to, like, if you want these bears, they make you buy Chinese bamboo, like the stupid bears know the difference. You know what, David? I will eat a panda bear on this live stream to spite the Chinese. I'm so appalled at the fact that we, after coddling and playing along with the Chinese regime and buying their overpriced bamboo and shipping it halfway around the world, that we're returning these bears and kissing the feet of the Chinese government while they hold 2 Canadians hostage. No thanks. We should be kidnapping these bears.
You know, Sheila, I don't believe the Calgary Zoo is being truthful that they have no problem giving these bears back. I can tell you one thing, whether you love panda bears or you're the statistical anomaly like Sheila Gunn-Reid that you want to eat a panda bear.
I do.
Panda bears are incredible at driving attendants when you go to a zoo. I got to tell you a quick little story. I think it was 1990. I went with Lady Menzoid to Busch Gardens in Florida, and they had a panda exhibit, and we waited. It was almost an hour in line in the Floridian sun. I'm turning as red as the sweater you're wearing, Sheila, getting burnt. And I said to Lady Menzoid, I said, when we finally get into the enclosure, I am going to take my sweet time just gazing upon those panda bears. And you know what, Sheila, when we finally got into the enclosure, you know what happens? You go up 3 steps, you go onto a treadmill and you're zoomed over. So if the pandas are hiding behind a log in the enclosure and you don't see them, too bad. So we waited an hour, I think, to get a 3-second glimpse of a panda's butt. And I'm telling you, never has so much time been spent for so little return. So the idea that Calgary Zoo, we can replace them with, gophers or badgers, same thing. No, it's not the same thing. They drive attendants, they drive merchandise sales. And going back to the more serious issue, you want your bears, you give us our citizens back and we have a deal. But no, we don't have anything like that. We don't have that intestinal fortitude in Ottawa, do we, Sheila?
No, not at all. I mean, we should be keeping these bears as political prisoners, to be quite honest with you. I will admit, I went to Calgary to see those stupid bears, and they are so unimpressive. And I stood there thinking, I thought, okay, well, I'm never going to go to China. I'm never going to set foot in China as long as the communists are in charge. I just won't. It's the same way I won't go to Cuba, even though many Canadians go for holiday there. I'll never go there either. And so I thought, okay, well, this is your chance, Sheila, to see these incredible mystical bears. So drive the 4 hours one way to Calgary to see these bears. And yeah, it's a big long lineup to get into the see these bears. However, we didn't have the airport style walk-a-lator that forces you through like you experienced. But I get there and I'm like, what's the big deal with these bears? They look like, so what if they're colored like Oreo cookies? I don't see the joy of this bear that just eats bamboo. And that's the thing, too. It's like these bears are endangered because they just eat bamboo because they never evolved to eat anything else. And they have a hard time digesting the bamboo, so they don't get a lot of nutrients. So they have to eat a lot of it, and they're pretty lazy. And I just stood there thinking, I drove 4 hours. This is going to be an 8-hour car ride, let alone the time I spend at the zoo to see these bears. And I have spent a good portion of my entire life avoiding bears at all costs. And I was just, and then the kids are like, let's go to the gift shop and spend $1 gazillion on bear things because that's what everybody's doing. The bears are a racket. We need to keep them hostage. We don't need to abuse them, but you're not getting your bears back, China.
Well, I say we came in as a bargaining chip, and I also say that this goes against my fervent hope. I brought this up on a couple of other shows with you, Sheila, that when this pandemic is over, you remember me talking about maybe we go to a fortress North America, that we specifically go out of our way to not buy Chinese goods, that we agree to pay a little more. If that $1,000 mountain bike is going to be $1,200 because it was made in Southern Ontario, yeah, I'm going to cough up the money that I don't have just because I don't want to be beholden to this regime. And, you know, I've already started this. And by the way, Donald Trump was ahead of the curve on this in terms of bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. And I think I mentioned this to you, do a little show and tell. These are my favorite running shoes. It's the New Balance 587. Look at that, Sheila. I can see this coming back in a big way. On the heel, it says made in USA, right?
Yeah.
Now, they don't make this anymore. It's been replaced by the 990, but that's still made in the USA. I can tell you, this is about a $140 running shoe. It pains me to spend that much for a sneaker, but you know what? It's an excellent quality item, and it's made domestically. I got another thing to show you. By the way, that's a size 13 EE. What do you think about that? This is my new radio. It's Sangian. It is made in Taiwan. Big difference from being made in China. And I'll tell you how I found this out. I got to give a plug to this business. They're in Vaughan. It's called Radio World. A couple of years ago, I went to replace my broken Grundig radio when Grundig was considered, and I thought was still considered, state of the art. And what the salesman told me is, even though the Grundig was even more than this, he said, get the Sangian, it is a better quality radio. And I said, well, I thought Grundig was the state of the art when I was given this as a gift, and it was a great radio. And he said, well, that was then, and this is now. Because guess what happened, Sheila? The made in Germany Grundig radios, that company was bought by China. The production of those radios was sent overseas to China, and Grundig, that once was state of the art, guess what happened? Right down the toilet in terms of quality. So I got this Sangian, made in Taiwan. It's an excellent radio. So you got to do your research, folks, and it's hard to buy a lot of material that is not made in China, but it is possible for some stuff. And this is how we should be sending a message, not sending bloody panda bears back to China when they're holding 2 citizens hostage.
Well,
Super chat.
Yes, super chats. And Ezra points out, the Chinese actually care more about these pandas than they do human lives. So they are a huge bargaining chip. And,
100%.
And I'm willing to eat one. I'm just putting it out there.
I find that unbearable.
Anyway, Theo, the local owner, gives us £5, sorry. This is a question for David. Did that hotel manager ever apologize to you, even a written apology?
Oh, no. As a matter of fact, it's very prescient that you were asking this, sir, because a couple of days ago, we were supposed to have our second day in small claims court. We have, we've gone through legal action in terms of this case. So they're fighting it tooth and nail despite the video evidence. But of course, because of the Wuhan virus, that court date was canceled. So stay tuned. As soon as we have our second day in court and hopefully a decision very soon after that, I'll let you know what happened.
Perfect. Let's get through these and then we can show a clip from Clarion, if that works with Justin. Okay, perfect. We've got one from Zona Rosa Smith, $3.99 Canadian. I don't see a super chat, but that's very generous. We've got one from Dan Brannigan, gives us $10. No super chat, also very generous. And this one is kind of exciting for me. It's my friend, Tom Harris of the International Climate Science Coalition. He gives us $10 Canadian. Beautiful. Tom was my guest on my show last night, and he's such a good supporter of the Rebel. And by the way, if you want to see Tom's interview with me, which is always lively and engaging, it's $8 a month to become a subscriber to Rebel News Plus, or you can catch the podcast for free. Tom Harris says, the Rebel is very important to Canada, especially since Sun News TV were driven out of business. Keep up the great work. We will, Tom. That's very generous. And you keep up the great work, too, telling the other side of the story with regard to climate change. And should we get to that Clarion Project clip. David, you might want to set it up, though.
Yes, this is an incredible story. It's about a man who was basically a former hippie, converted to Islam, and then tried to go down the route of a jihadi. He's the one who threatened the co-creators of South Park with violence for the famous Prophet Muhammad cartoon episode. Something you can't see anymore, by the way, Sheila. Something, you know, that...
I didn't know that.
I think it's known as episode 201, and it's apparently just disappeared. So, but the good news is he, while he was in jail, flipped again, this time to the side of good, becoming an FBI informant on jihadis. And if Mr. Producer has a clip, we can show you a little bit of this documentary.
My interactions with the FBI, a female FBI agent, did see not only, number one, that I was altering my positions, but also saw, because they were monitoring the activity that was going on outside of the prison, that I still had influence. And so I began to cooperate with the FBI, and I began to help wherever needed, due to the fact that I was able to help them find out Americans that had traveled overseas and were plotting attacks or encouraging and directing attacks from abroad. And I was able to get intelligence for them. I was released after 3 years and 8 months on March 1st, 2015. Every time I think that the legacy that I left behind is over, something happens. Usman Khan killed someone coming home from prison in the United Kingdom a week and a half ago. I knew Usman Khan. He radicalized inside of my Pal Talk rooms on the internet. The Boston Marathon bombers utilized the recipe that was issued in Inspire magazine to build the pressure cooker bombs and the pipe bombs that were thrown at police in the aftermath in the days after the attack when they were apprehended. It was important because by that time, I was already incarcerated for a terrorism-related offense. And when I was sentenced, the prosecuting attorney for the federal government said, "Your Honor, someday, somewhere, someone's going to die as a result of these magazines. It hasn't happened yet, but it will, I can assure you." And I remember thinking in the courtroom, there's no way. And the Boston Marathon bombings made it apparent that there actually was a way, that it doesn't matter when you change or stop espousing a particular idea, that ideas are eternal. They die, they have no expiration date. You cannot change what you've done in the past, no matter how heinous it was. So I wake up every day, and right now I have a roof over my head that allows me to do this every day and to make amends. I couldn't ask for a greater opportunity. I will say that when things happen that show me the sustained resonance and impact of my ideas, my first reaction is to hate myself. My second reaction is to work harder.
You know, Sheila, just more excellent content from the Clarion Project. And if our viewers want to see the whole documentary, please go to rebelnews.com/Clarion. That's rebelnews.com/Clarion. Well worth your time checking out.
Yeah, it's a great video. It's very well done. It's part of our partnership with Clarion. And that's Jesse Morton, and he is taking his life in his hands when he tells his story, because you don't leave the Islamic radicals behind and then just go on your life. They come for you. They start looking for you, and Jesse's work puts it puts a target on his back. He's very high profile and he's very outspoken, and the work he's doing puts him at great peril. And yeah, people can check that out. Again, you gave the website rebelnews.com/Clarion. David, we're this so fast, the show today. We've got
Come on, we had a whole list of things we haven't even touched on.
I know, so many. We've got still super chats because these people are helping us beat Ezra. Yeah. It's so generous. We've got one from Theo, local loaner. Again, thank you very much. £2 says, "I can't wait until David meets Jordan Hunt again."
Oh.
That little puke, Jordan Hunt. There's a whole list of people that these male feminists that I would love to see in a charity boxing match. You know, if they want to go around punching women, punch one that's ready for your little delicate wrist to take a swing at her. I'd love to fight these guys in a ring, face to face, instead of them running up and sucker punching women in the street and then shoving them into traffic like Jordan Hunt did. And I would donate the proceeds of said boxing match to a pro-life charity of my choice.
Oh, that's a pay-per-view for me, Sheila. I forgot about that little misfit. And he's gotten out of hairstyling, probably at the worst time because everybody needs their haircut. And he's now pursuing a career in culinary arts. Would you eat a cupcake made by Jordan Hunt, Sheila?
100% he's vegan. 100% that guy is vegan. For the animals, while he's shoving pro-life women in the street because they want babies to live. I guarantee you. Anyway, we've got another super chat from Patrick Reed. It gives us $27.99 Canadian. No relation. It says, thanks for being you. Well, Patrick, thank you for being you.
Thank you.
And that, I believe, takes us to the end of the show.
Wow. Well, look at that. The fastest hour on the internet. So on the behalf of Sheila Gunn-Reid, somewhere in the hinterland of northern Alberta, where there's still snow on the ground, and myself, David Menzies, here at Rebel News World Command Headquarters, we bid you adieu and stay safe. And Ezra Levent will be back in this chair at this time tomorrow for Battleground. Thanks so much for tuning in.